On this episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast, I'm joined by Seàn Young. Sean has been teaching languages for 30 years, and in this episode, he teaches us how to become better language teachers.
Welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast, the podcast that gives you the tools and inspiration to learn languages faster and more efficiently. And now your host, Chris Broholm.
Hello guys, welcome back to the Actual Fluency Podcast. As always, my name is Chris Broholm. Today I have a very special episode for you, and it is a little bit different. If you've listened to the episodes 1, 2, and 3, you will notice that I talk to language learners, specifically people who are interested in the learning aspects of a language and how to improve in a language the best and fastest way. Now that is a very interesting discussion, and I'm sure I'll have plenty of people on, plenty of language learners on for you to talk about how to learn language better and give you all those tips and inspiration for you to learn languages faster and more efficiently. For now though, today I'm gonna be talking to Seàn Young, and he runs a language consulting business out of Texas in America. I don't know if there are any other Texases, but that's definitely the one he's in. And the interesting thing is that Seàn isn't just a language teacher, he's also a language learner. So he's kind of giving us the both of best worlds in this interview. And he's a very interesting person to talk to and listen to because he has over 30 years experience in teaching languages and even longer experience in learning them. And he's studied over 50 languages. So he's an incredibly knowledgeable man, and he's just so fascinating to listen to. But the reason I wanted to bring on Seàn and talk about teaching languages is because I think, I can only speak for myself, of course, but I think that once you get interested in languages and you learn a lot of languages, it's only natural that you want to give back and try and teach somebody else what you've learned, whether it's your native language or an acquired language. And in my opinion, there are good ways to teach a language and there are really bad ways. On the blog, I constantly talk about how bad school language teaching is today. And it's something that me and Seàn also get into in the interview. But I just wanted to bring on Seàn because if you want to become a language teacher, or you're already teaching somebody, or tutoring is another word, then this episode is especially for you because he really goes into great lengths to explain what it means to be a great teacher. And I really agree with his points. And from this episode, I've learned a lot. And that means that I'm now actually a registered community tutor on italki. And of course, this is experimental. I don't know if I want to be a teacher full time, but I'm definitely going to give it a go and see if I have any talent for it. Because at the end of the day, you have these trial lessons with students, and it's actually meant for students to try out the teacher and see if it works. But for me, it's also going to be an experiment to see just how much I enjoy teaching. And so this episode has been really great for me, and I hope that you will enjoy it as well in case you need any kind of teaching information. If you're not interested in teaching at all, which I think you should be because we all cross paths with a teacher in some way or another, whether we are the teacher or we're being taught by a teacher. We also actually dedicate a few minutes to talk about his language learning strategies and how he approaches that. So although it is an episode about teaching languages, we do get into learning languages as well. It's we couldn't resist because it was so natural. So as always, if there are any links or anything mentioned during the interview, you can find the show notes over on actualfluency.com/04. And also within there, you can read the text of the biography of Seàn. And also there's an interesting announcement, a competition that Seàn is doing. And you can also find the link to that there. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce Seàn Young and talking about teaching languages. Enjoy. All right, welcome back to the show. My guest today has been teaching languages since 1984. that's coming up to 30 years in June. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome Seàn Young of Young's Language Consulting to the podcast. How are you doing this fine day, Seán?
I am doing fine.
Fantastic.
So far.
So far. It's only going to get better.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So for those who don't know you, can you give a real quick introduction to yourself and what you do?
Well, as you said, I've been in the language business for 30 years, but I've actually started in 1978 when I was 13 years old.
Wow.
Not teaching, but I was in middle school when I was learning about ancient Egypt. And the language, the hieroglyphs and stuff intrigued me, and that's what started me learning. I started studying the hieroglyphs and how to speak ancient Egyptian. And of course, I'm not very fluent in that today since I don't have very many ancient Egyptians around to talk to.
No.
But I just had this passion for languages ever since, and that's pretty much what I've been doing, just almost living and breathing languages.
And I just keep going. That start there just propelled you to just get started on it.
I guess something snapped, and there I went.
That's incredible, though, and I've talked to other people about this, where they have this defining moment where some interest in peaked, and that literally defines the course of their lives. And I just find that amazing to happen for you with languages. Of course, you're from America, in America as well. And it's not very, I wouldn't say normal, but it's not very natural to learn a lot of languages in America. How was it back then when you started out? Was it even worse, or was it better, or?
I'd say it's about the same.
Mm-hmm.
Here in the United States, most people are of the mindset, I guess you can say, that, here in America, we speak English. And the thing is, America does not have an official language. So all bets are off there. But yeah, when people heard back then, and even now, that I'm learning a language, they look at me like, really? It just depends on, what they're actually, it's either like, why are you doing that? Or, hey, that's really cool,
Right. Well, it's cool to get a bit of mixed impressions that way.
Oh, yeah.
So what can we do as we're both content publishers in language learning, albeit kind of in the shadows, of course, but what can we do to inspire more people, maybe particularly in America, to learn languages and remove that weird, stigma almost that is with learning more languages?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of good answers on that one. I would say probably if you think about the global economy and how, even though most people around the world speak English, and there's a lot of business that does stuff in English, there's still only 9% of the world will speak and understand English.
Right.
And there's all the rest of them that doesn't. And so therefore, to try and reach them, and if you want to do business with them or just have communication or to have better camaraderie, especially with tourism and things like that, learning another language, it can help you either make new friends, or if you're going on tourism, you won't believe how much better service and discounts you can get on things talking in their language.
Awesome. So you think we should send out a memo to the American population and say, if you want to save more money on your holidays, you should learn the language?
That is correct.
Well, that's
and same with business too. You can get better services that way too.
Right. And of course, if you speak, the Asian countries have been developing for many years and are now really strong economies. And if you want to do business in China or in Japan, usually it's very, very good to have that language to be able to conduct business in.
Oh, yeah.
I know they have, they're a very reserved culture. So if you just come and speak English, they might understand you and they might have English skills as well. But it's just a whole different experience, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I travel through Europe and it is quite interesting to see the differences between those who are willing to speak a foreign language or those who are not.
Right. It's just a matter of attitude, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That goes back to learning as well. I mean, if you don't feel like you should, or you need to, I mean, then why should you? It's an attitude, isn't it?
Yeah, and that attitude is fed by a lot of these companies that want people to believe that languages are difficult or impossible to learn. I mean, they feed that to the public to give so that people think, oh, well, maybe their method is better.
Right.
I'll pay for them. But it really doesn't do much. So, there's a lot of myth going on,
Yeah, and maybe that's the kind of the key to opening up language learning for more people, is to simply let them know that it's not as hard as you think it is.
Yeah, that's something that I've always emphasized for years with my business. I've always given little tips and stuff on how to make a language easier to learn.
Right. That's I noticed you wrote a book about Spanish, what you already know, talking about cognates is the fancy term some people like to use about it, where basically you look at the loan words or the impressions that another language has in the target language that you're trying to learn. And that's what you mean, right? You already know a lot.
The cognates and things that look very similar. I mean, I have one, like you said, for Spanish. You already know I have one for Italian and Portuguese. And I'm doing some others for like Danish, German, Dutch, other languages that are related to English, which if the person speaks English, they can learn like 14 other European languages without a problem.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm doing some minor work in a lot of languages, and the similarity is just, I mean, it's incredible. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Well, as a speaker of Danish, Norwegian won't count for you.
Actually, I have a funny story about that. I was actually gonna learn Norwegian because as you know, I'm Danish, so I of course know that Norwegian is almost the same as bokmål, as the Norwegian bokmål. But the thing is that when I put it into my vocabulary training, and I did, I started at the back end in a frequency list. So I took the hardest words first. I just looked at Danish words, and I was like, this is not even worth my time. This is how similar it is. So I'm now considering calling myself fluent in Norwegian as well. What do you think about that?
That you could probably do that, yeah. Because Danish and Norwegian, well, when they were once one kingdom, they all shared the same language practically.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's how close it is. And I'm sure the French and the Spanish-speaking countries have very similar experiences, with the different maybe the dialects and stuff like that, where they can understand each other mutually. Like I've heard about Spanish and Portuguese, even though those are, I would say, different languages, definitely. I mean, I've heard that they both speak each other's language. So, I mean, they understand it.
Yeah. When I remember in high school, I had a girlfriend from Mexico, and she was talking to a Brazilian exchange student. I heard Spanish and Portuguese going along, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, how do you know that?
Exactly. I mean, and that's the joys of, I think that's one of the first things anyone should tell a new language learner is, a lot of words already. Like I'm studying Russian as well. And even in there's so many English words that it's kind of easy. There's also words that don't sound like anything I've ever heard, but that's the challenge of it.
Yeah.
So if we talk about, we talked about your consulting business, your teaching business. What is it exactly you do? Because when you say language consulting, does that mean that you actually tutor people, or you're more into the business side where you go out to businesses and teach, or is it simply everything that relates to language consulting?
Pretty much everything. Okay. If you have a language related question, I can answer it for you. If you need some clarification of something, I can answer that for you. If you want language lessons or little tidbits here and there, I do it all.
All right. So it's like 1-800 languages or something.
There you go. Hey, I should try that.
I don't know. The phones might be going out of service soon.
That's true.
By Skype. So, well, that's great. We often talk about language learning, and that aspect of the coin. But what I really want to talk to you is, since I have this amazing language teacher who's been doing it for so long, is really language teaching, because that is important. No,
Oh yeah.
even if we're self-taught, we're still teachers in that way, and we still use. I mean, we can maybe call the software or the audio course or whatever tools we use to teach ourselves might be the teacher in that aspect, but teaching is really important, I feel like. And I feel like a lot of people, myself included, and in fact, that's how we connected actually on Facebook, is that I put a post up saying, I would really like to teach somebody Danish. And it wasn't anyone specific. So it was really kind of I mean, it encompassed everyone who might be interested in Danish. And I asked, how do I teach people Danish? And it was a big question. And you linked to you had a Finnish course, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of showing how you would approach it. And I was very inspired by that. So it actually also applies a lot to me on how to become a teacher. And I think a lot of people are interested in tutoring maybe, or, making a few dollars here and there on the side if they want to teach somebody else a language. So let's get into that, the teaching aspect. How different is it to teach sort of one-to-one or, as a consulting compared to the teaching in a classroom setting?
Well, in a classroom setting, you are teaching or you're talking to multiple students. And each student has a different way of teaching, learning, I mean. Not everybody has one generic way to learn. Everybody's different. And from that, you have to teach something generically, teach lessons generically, right, in a way that hopefully everybody will understand. Of course, everybody's going to have questions and things. One-on-one, you can talk to the student, find out exactly what they know, what they don't know, where they're having problems, and you can adjust things according to their needs. And that way it makes it a better experience with a one-on-one type.
You can specialize the content to fit with the needs specifically.
Yeah.
And of course, that's also why people generally have better success learning a language with a one-on-one teacher compared to the classrooms. Because I know in Europe, particularly in Denmark, I know that when you go to high school or whatever and you go into your German classes, a lot of people don't actually gain any kind of fluency. They might get some basic vocabulary and maybe some basic knowledge of the grammar, but they can't speak the language. Do you feel like that's the same that happens in America? I mean, as a generalization, of course.
Oh yeah, I've seen like in high schools and things, a student will go through their classes perfect, 100% getting A's, and they'll be like maybe at a B1 level, right, according to the European framework. But when they get out of school, they can't order a sandwich. They don't know how. Right. Because normally, well, I'm not sure exactly the teaching methods over there in Europe, but here in the United States, it's more like grammar intensive, and this is how you're supposed to say it. Repeat it back to me. Right. Yeah, that sounds very similar, actually. They probably got it from the same place originally. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, that was it. That's it. Oh, okay. And so with me, I've learned and, researched, and I developed a way that the best way to teach a student is to have the students teach each other. Right. And this kind of environment, I prefer to have like maybe 4 or 5 students together in a group. Uh-huh. That way they can, me as the teacher, I give them what they need to know, kind of explain it, how to go about doing it. And then they will talk among themselves as to how does the material translate? What are they learning? Right. And talk among each other to try and figure out what's wrong. And the teacher should be just a person who is guiding them to whatever, like if they're really stuck and they can't find the answer or something like that. But why isn't that, I mean, that sounds like a really great way of doing it, but why is that not possible in schools? I mean, if you have 20 students, why can't you just form 4 of your groups
and then have it work that way?
Well, people are more into the traditional style of teaching that has been, quote unquote, proven accurate for centuries.
Yeah.
So, and that's what they use, because anything new, they will kind of like not be sure of, or they'll try to put it down as it's not going to work or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have my teaching methods outlined in a book, and I have a teacher down in Houston, Texas, who tried it with his class.
Yeah.
His Spanish class. And he says that the students have really improved immensely in that way alone.
But that's incredible. That's a testament to the method, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, and that's just one class.
Yeah,
if you could roll it out, then a lot more people could improve.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to figure out how I can make it more marketable, and and see if that could be more of a standard way of teaching.
Right. I think you need to get into the school lobbies, like the big organizations that do all the political lobbying for what courseworks and textbooks should be in the classrooms.
Oh yeah.
Probably need some political context there, unfortunately. So if we move on a little bit from the classroom and into the more intimate setting of, let's say, a few students or maybe even one-on-one, what's some of the, if you're just starting out being a tutor, let's call it a tutor. If you're not that experienced, a tutor is probably more of a fitting word. How do you go about being a great tutor for someone? Like, say you go on to the Anki or one of the other websites that facilitate this kind of contact. How do you become a great tutor without, obviously you get paid for the service per hour you do, but how do you prepare for teaching someone else on that kind of tutoring level?
Well, basically you have to get to know the student first. I will contact the student first, and first time meeting them, I will, talk with them, interview them, kind of, find out what they need for language, what they're going to use it for, what their knowledge is or skill level, if they've learned languages before. And I also have some assessment sheets that I give them so that they can mark off what they can do in a language if they've learned one before.
Right.
And that will tell me exactly where they are, so that I can go from there and create customized lessons for them.
Right.
Because like I said before, nobody can learn the same way no matter what.
Right. So you want to sit down and get to know how their language, mind, or brain works before you set on with the language. That's a really interesting idea, and obviously a really good idea as well. I guess the thing is that you might get a student who's never done the language before. Let's say I'm Danish, which I happen to be, luckily, and somebody wants to learn Danish from me, and they have never seen a Danish word or text or heard Danish before. How do you then use that assessment to build a program? And if they haven't even learned a foreign language before, how can you know what kind of learner they are? Do you then try them out and ask them about their school experience or other subjects, or like how would you assess someone like that someone like the typical American maybe?
Well, let's say, for example, let's say you wanted to learn Swahili.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would do is like I said, I just sit down, talk with you, find out what language experience you had before in the past. Obviously, you do have some being European, and your other personal studies. And I will then try and kind of figure out where to go from there. It's kind of like an open-ended interview, like we're doing right now, you and I.
Right.
Trying to just bounce each other's ideas off and see what they can do on whatever they need to do.
Right. Get their goals maybe, so you have something to stick to. Like if they're going to Germany in 6 months, then maybe that's the goal for some kind of basic fluency, or get those smart goals.
And sometimes when I ask, what do you need the language for? Because I don't expect everyone to want to know generic stuff. Like if you're going to travel to a country where they speak Swahili, you're going there for business, then I will focus more on traveling and business type lessons. If you're going just for tourism, I'll give you tourism stuff, Right. I won't give you all the extra stuff that you don't need, like any grammar rules that I know you won't be using. I won't teach you those. Or vocabulary you won't be using, Right. So I teach you what you need to know, and I just kind of try to feel it out from there.
I think that's a really good thing, because then when if people who are listening want to tutor someone in their own language, then they can start by figuring out, well, who is the student and what is their goal, and then try to find material related to that.
Yeah.
How would that material kind of look like? If you're, let's say I was coming to you and I want to learn German because I'm going to Germany on a holiday, would you then use like textbook kind of text? So would you use audio, listening to German movies? What would that typical kind of content, so to speak, of the lessons be like?
Well, if you're going on holiday to Germany, what I do is I make out a basic. I have generic lessons that I have that I customize according to the person. Like, for example, basic generic German lessons. But if you want to go on holiday, then I will add in stuff like to go sightseeing, some shopping type phrases, or travel by taxi if you'll be using a taxi.
Right.
And I will also throw in not just standard German speech type stuff, but I will also help you hear through audio how the language is actually spoken when you hear it on the street.
Right.
Because not everybody's going to say, Guten Tag, wie geht es Ihnen? No. They'll just say, hey, Guten Tag, wie geht's? Or something like that.
They speak it very fast as well. The Germans, of course, being known for that.
Yeah. So I get you to understand, to listen for, actual colloquial speech.
Right.
And how you can use it yourself in any kind of slang or idioms that would be appropriate for the situation that you're in.
Right. It sounds like you're taking a very practical approach. I mean, of course, it's a very practical situation, but would you say in general that your approach to language teaching is based more on using the language rather than knowing maybe every single grammar rule or every end?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's normal for the students as well. It's very rare for students to come to you and ask, I want to know all the grammar of German.
I've had some people like that where they just want to know the language just for the sake of knowing it.
Right.
Which is understandable. That way, because you got like newspapers or TV shows that use a standard language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if they need that, that's fine too.
It's very hard though, starting out with knowing everything about German grammar. I don't even do that, and I can throw a rock to the German border almost.
Yeah, I'm telling you, sometimes German grammar and some European languages, they got some grammar that Icelandic especially will give me a headache.
Right. Oh, so is that kind of your if you wake up in the middle of the night and you have a language grammar nightmare, is that in Icelandic then?
I guess you could say that, yes.
So conversely, what is the language you've tried with the least advanced grammar or the easiest to learn or pick up?
The easiest to learn or pick up that I've taught, or?
Well, just gotten to know somehow, just not, it doesn't have to be very extensively, just to know it somehow.
Oh, Spanish. Spanish, Italian, Portuguese.
All right.
Those are the real easy ones for an English speaker to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So,
can recommend Danish as well. It's nice. Simple grammar. I don't know if it's the easiest one, but it's definitely a lot more simple than people think. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I saw also on your website, you have a little section about language teaching with a bit of some gold tips and advice. But if you had to, and of course I'll throw a link to that website and those pages, and you can always find the links and everything at the bottom of the show notes, which is actualfluency.com / and then the episode number. So in this case, it would be 04. So episode 4. But the question was, if you had, you have all this wisdom, all these good tips and tricks about language teaching. If you had to give like your top 3 tips to be a great language teacher, what would those be?
Do not teach in a traditional sense, in a traditional teaching way. Make sure the student understands before you move on to to new material, and keep it simple to understand and clearly understood.
Right. So keep it simple. Make sure the student understands. And don't teach in a traditional sense, like in the classroom, kind of just yelling out grammar and repetition.
Correct.
Like we mentioned before. Okay, those are some really good ones, I think. And if you're teaching someone, let's say in a one-on-one kind of scenario, what kind of additional resources would you supplement the teaching with? We talked about text and audio, but are there any kind of softwares or audio courses or something where you say you could really use this to supplement the teaching material as well?
Well, you can, with the internet, you can go anywhere and find something like online radio, YouTube videos, newspapers. Right. As for software, I would say something that can help reinforce would be like Rosetta Stone. Transparent Language. They have software that's some free online lessons that can also help you with some grammar rules. And for audio type stuff, Pimsleur is good. They are limited in some of the things that you can say or do with it, but Pimsleur is good for hearing how a language sounds. Right. And things, and of course, like I said, the actual YouTube videos and things like that online, you can hear the language in the wild, I guess you could say. Right. But, just go out there and find them, because the opportunities are out there. Yeah, obviously the internet has kind of revolutionized language learning and made it easier than it ever was before. Oh, yeah. When I started way back in the 70s and 80s, that was hard. Not much language learning going on back then in general, which is kind of a shame, but I guess languages are so alive and fluent, and that they kind of needed that medium of the internet to really blossom, because all this polyglot thing and stuff, that's, I guess, a product of the internet in the sense. Yeah. I just feel very fortunate that I'm getting into this now with the internet and not having to bike to the library and get the one course in Spanish that they might have and not be limited. Oh yeah. So it's amazing. And I guess that's a good segue to ending the kind of the language teaching, as we talk about here, and how to become a better tutor or teacher. And of course, you've also been studying a lot of languages. And I think if you're a really good language teacher, you would be studying anyway. But how do you balance? Because I read on your website that you've looked at 50 languages, and of course, looking, I'm assuming that it's very different from learning. And I guess that some of those 50 you looked at a lot, and some of those 50 you just glanced a bit at. But how do you balance, teaching languages a lot, and I presume that's a full-time job kind of thing, and then also in your free time learning languages? Don't you get sick and tired of languages by the time when you go to bed and you've studied all day? Well, yes and no. I'm just one of those weird type of people that just live and breathe languages. I'm always thinking about them. Right. As for teaching them and learning them at the same time, it's gotten to the point where right now it's a teaching myself while learning type process, I guess you can say. Right. Because I was learning Hindi last year, and in the process of learning Hindi, I would go out and find different resources, because I live in the Dallas area, so there's a lot of Hindi stuff around. So I would go out there and teach myself by finding people and asking them questions. Right. So that's engaging with the native speakers of the language.
is an important thing, you think?
And that's something that's always important that I always do, that I always encourage my students. When you're talking to a native speaker, always make sure you ask them, something like, if something didn't sound right to you, just ask them, did I say that right? Or how do I say so-and-so in your language or something?
Constantly bug find or, look for mistakes that you're doing so you don't reinforce the mistakes by repeating them all the time.
Right.
Yeah, that's something I struggle with a lot as well.
By learning.
It's really hard, I think, when you're learning a new language, to actually look at your own sentence and find the flaws. And some of the, I have a Russian tutor, and she's very friendly and everything. But if she had to correct every single mistake, we would do nothing else. So of course there's a balance to it. But I really like it when she says, we would say this, or that was almost right, or it kind of annoys me sometimes when I know she just accepts it, even though I know I made a mistake or I made a questionable formulation. But I mean, you're saying that you should also carry some of the responsibility yourself, and when you're out there in the wild, so to speak, just ask, was that okay? And I'm sure you can say that in very few words in the target language. You don't have to say long sentences of, did I use the prepositional object correctly or whatever.
Yeah.
Just ask, okay. That's almost enough, isn't it? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they understand what you're talking about. They'll sometimes tell you either did okay or they will, correct it for you.
Right. And be having an open mind. But of course, that kind of goes with the whole, choosing to learn a language in the first place. You already have that open mindset, so you can actually go out and find your own mistakes. You don't have to be, scared or afraid of saying a word incorrectly or using the wrong grammar, because that would just halt you.
Sometimes that might come up. That's why when I teach and people say, "Oh, how do I say the vulgar words and swear words?" I'm like, I don't teach those because they might accidentally come up and you can offend somebody.
Right. Yeah, you have to be really careful with culture as well, because definitely in Europe and I guess in America as well, swear words might be quite innocent and widely used, but in other cultures they might be really, really strong and like used to almost like summon Satan himself, or so I guess that's a good point. If you're learning a new language and it's in a culture that's vastly different from your own, be sure to kind of get to know that culture a little bit, so you don't just, because they're also a normal sentences, what you talk about, for instance, talking about money in Europe is way different from talking about money in America. In Europe, we don't talk about money that way. Like, we don't talk about how much we have. We don't talk about how much we make. If you ask someone, how much money do you make? That's actually quite offensive. But if you go to America, I get the impression that's quite normal. That's quite kind of like, that's just a normal dinner table question. So how much do you make? Maybe you can correct me on that if that's not entirely the case.
No, that's the case here in America. Asking somebody, how much do you make? I mean, it depends. It's up to the person being asked whether they want to answer or not.
Right.
Mostly they'll answer you, but, it's really nothing, no big deal here.
Right. Yeah. And it is here. I mean, nobody would answer it with a number, at least. They might say, I'm doing okay, or yeah, I could do better or something. But even then, they might still feel offended. So that's a good example of how different the culture is. And I know Judith, who I'll have on the podcast as well, in the last episode, actually, speaking Back to the Future here. But she also talks about how it is in German, and she runs this blog about German culture. And she talks about how some tourists don't really know the German, how the mentality is. So I guess that's a big point to bring out of this is do your research in the target language and ask native speakers, what do you think about this question or this word? How does it make you feel? And really get to know it. And I guess that's studying a language and its culture at the same time.
Yeah, that's important too, is knowing the culture, because the culture shapes the language also. So
do you have any, I talked about this example of Danish or German. Do you have any examples of that where you learned some culture in along with learning a language, and some surprises maybe, or something you went, that's interesting?
I see that. I do that a lot.
Well, there you go.
There's the usual the basics of culture, like shake hands, make eye contact, things like that.
Right.
I'm trying to think now.
Yeah, there are lots of them, but there's so many of them we can't find them.
Huh?
It's like we can't see the forest for the trees. There's so many examples that they hide away.
Well, it's like when I taught Arabic to some men who go to like Saudi Arabia or something like that, and I tell them, shake hands with a man, but don't shake hands with a woman over there. It's like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, according to their culture, it's forbidden under Muslim, culture and things like that, And so I said, the only time you shake hands with a woman is she's like, a family member, or if she extends her hand first.
Right.
Otherwise, don't offer your hand for a handshake to over there.
That's super important as well. And taking off your shoes outside the church and other things like that. And I guess if you're from France and you do the kissing greetings, then that's something you probably shouldn't do in Arabic countries as well.
Right.
That's really good. So with all these languages and all this studying, what are some of the lessons to learning a new language that you kind of like to share to the people who are learning languages out there? Like, what are some of the, again, if we went back to the golden tips of language teaching, what are your tips about language learning that we haven't already talked about?
How many you need?
Well, I don't know. A few, I guess.
The top ones that I can think of is just when you start to learn a language, you decide to learn one, just jump right in. Right. Don't hesitate. Do not be afraid to make mistakes. They exist so that we can learn from them.
Right.
And whatever you do, don't think you have to learn everything in one sweep. Take your time.
Right.
That's all you can do.
There's a lot of focus on the time right now, isn't there? About, people saying, oh, I learned Spanish in 3 months. Oh, I did it in 6 weeks. And that I feel like that can hinder people's progress because they have unnatural expectations. Or what do you think about
learning a language in short times like that?
No, just the obsession that there is today about this, like the time frame is so important. Because I feel like it's important to set a deadline, but it seems like it's gotten to the point where people are like, I learned Russian in a weekend or something. It's just gotten insane, I feel like.
Yeah, something like that. It's a nice goal to have, but it's pretty much very, very difficult to reach. Because if you don't know where to start or how to do it, then you will get confused and frustrated or disappointed. So yeah, like you said, setting a goal is not really a good idea, but at least have some kind of goal.
Right.
Like today I'm going to learn the conjugation of this verb here, or tomorrow I'll learn this, sentence or paragraph or something.
Yeah, we talked about goal setting in the very first episode of the podcast, where we said that, it's good to have a grip, a kind of an anchor in a goal. But if you make that goal too unrealistic, then it can have adverse effects. Whereas if you said, I want to learn Russian in 2 months or 1 month or whatever, and you don't do it, the disappointment might be, much greater than if you said, I'll learn it in 6 months. I might need 8, but at least, I got close or whatever.
Yeah. At least I tried it.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people also underestimate just doing, I'm studying a lot of languages now, and you have during a lot of years. But I guess the one point that I'm kind of getting now is when I'm studying these languages, I'm not necessarily interested in the end result right in the middle of studying it, because the journey or the studying in itself is quite interesting. Like just knowing one word in Russian or one phrase or getting to read one sentence. It really opens up. It's exciting, isn't it?
Oh, yes. And when you can say it to a native speaker and they understand you, boom, there you go.
Instant gratification. But people don't give themselves the opportunity to be in that position because they never begin.
Right.
Because they think it's too hard.
And sometimes they'll have these notions in their mind that it's going to be hard, so I got to really study, work at it.
Right. And that doesn't sound fun, does it?
No, that's the wrong attitude to have.
Exactly. So before we wrap up here, I just wanted to maybe take just a little step to the side and ask you. I mean, you've been having your own language consulting business for almost 30 years now in June, and I know you have a little fun competition for that. And is that something you want to share with the listeners?
Yes, it's a little contest type thing where you can. I got a Facebook group up for it where you can upload a picture or a video of yourself either speaking a foreign language that you're learning or practicing. The picture can be, a picture of yourself with a caption or something in the language you're studying. Mm-hmm. And just upload it and see how many people will like them. And the winners, the top 3 winners will win cash prizes and free language lessons.
Ooh, we like us some cash prizes and language lessons. Did I read it correctly that you would give away a year's worth of language lessons?
Yes, sir.
That's such a big prize. Shouldn't that be first prize?
That will be first prize.
Good.
There's a cash prize and the 1 year of free language lessons for first prize.
Holy. But then again, 30 years of the 30-year anniversary of a language learning business doesn't happen often, does it? Yep. So you want to make it a big party. So you're going to have a reception in Dallas and invite everyone to come down and speak a lot of languages and have some champagne. And
that would be an interesting idea. Well, I'm still kind of getting things figured out here and rearranged and organized, but I could probably come up with something like that.
Yeah, just be sure you don't schedule it on top of the Polyglot Berlin conference, as I know quite a few Americans are going there at least. I know.
Oh no, I want to hold competition with them. They will. No, I'm just kidding.
You could, I guess, being in America. So that's kind of the logistical problem, isn't it? That a lot of bringing together America and Europe is so expensive in terms of plane tickets. Yeah. That normal people just can't go to these events. I mean, I would love to come over and say hi to you and meet you in person and check out the Dallas area, but it's just it's over $1,000 return. So, and that only gets you from airport to airport. Then you have to consider everything else. So, it's just not feasible.
Or we just do a online gathering like on Skype or something. We could all get together and just talk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen this language hour that I've been starting with the other Chris Huff, which is a Google Hangout every Sunday where we talk about languages. You're more than welcome to join me if you're available. It's on Sundays and it's at 8 p.m. CET. So that's about, if you're in Texas, that will probably be something like 6 or 7 hours before that. So around noon, 1 p.m. or something, Sunday, where you're more than welcome to drop by.
I'll have to look it up.
It's a very casual setting. So when I say drop by, it's not kind of it's not an interview. It's more of we hang out and talk about languages. And if you just have 15 minutes or whatever to kill and you want to come on and say hi, just, drop me a message and I'll be sure to invite you.
Okay.
That could be fun.
Sounds good.
All right. So with everything said, is there any last shout outs you want to give, or where can people find you and learn more about you? Of course, all the links and the competition details and everything we talked about will be in the show notes, which you can find at actualfluency.com/04. But do you have any kind of interesting things going on right now that you want to talk about apart from the competition?
Well, I am building on my website what's called a polyglot hangout. And there's about 130 languages planned where you can just go and research different languages or learn different languages and things like that with using all the knowledge and know-how that I can give.
Right.
That's about the major thing after the competition that I have going on right now. But
great.
Otherwise, I'm just going around helping people speak to others around the world.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you for doing that, because we've been part of some of the same Facebook groups and networks for a week or 2 or 3 weeks now, and I always see you try and help people, and I really appreciate that you take the time out of your day to inspire and help other people. So thank you so much for that.
I do what I can.
Amazing. That's the only thing we can do at the end of the day. But Sean, It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can talk to you all day, I'm sure. But I just want to thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and, sharing your passion and your interest and your golden tips about how to be a better teacher and also a better learner in the end of the day. So thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll hang out at another time.
Hey, no problem. And thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
Likewise. See ya.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast. For more information, be sure to check out actualfluency.com. Until next time, enjoy learning and have a great day.